Hello again, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather on the 6th day of February 2022. I'm David Percy. Up first on the hazardous weather graphic, still a wind chill warning out for the eastern Arctic coast, eastern North Slope, and the eastern Brooks Range for tonight into at least midday tomorrow for wind chills of 50 to 65 degrees below zero. And then on the west coast, they're including St. Lawrence Island, Nunivak Island, Bering Strait coast, and part of the western interior. It's a wind chill advisory out for tonight into midday Monday for wind chills running 35 to 55 below zero. Otherwise, that's it for the warnings, watches, and advisories around the state. So moving into satellite imagery, we can see still southwest flow moving surges of moisture into the southeast coast. Main front already moved through, weakening, pushing well into the northwest territories of Canada. Low pressure center moving north over the eastern North Gulf Coast. Earlier today, that brought some pretty strong winds over the northern panhandle. Peak wind gusts 61 miles per hour recorded at Skagway, and about 50 miles an hour at Sitka, and 50 to 55 miles per hour in windier areas along the coast. Juneau had a peak wind gust 44 miles an hour, for example. Those are all coming down during the afternoon today. And out to the west, cold air pushing southward again over the Bering Sea. And you can see the edge of the clouds there from the last satellite imagery. You can see right on the ice edge, kind of matches up there with picking up some clouds of the Pribilofs, and snow showers pretty widespread south of there, but not quite into the Aleutians yet, some into the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutian areas. That low tracking up into the Yukon there, near or just east of Yakutat, another low hanging back in Prince William Sound. Heaviest rainfall amounts over the northern panhandle. Dry Bay had 2.82 inches in a 12-hour period, ending at midday today, while Yakutat picked up around an inch. Only a tenth of an inch fell in the Juneau area, but Petersburg picked up 2/3 of an inch of precipitation. And then rainfall amounts are quite varied and variable over the southern panhandle, ranging from 1 to 2/10 of an inch in some locations to over 2 inches in the upslope areas in other locations. Otherwise, Valdez picked up 4 to 6 inches of snow today. We had areas of snow over the Copper River Basin. Lighter amounts north of the Alaska Range and Nenana, around an inch, maybe 1 to 2 inches north of the Alaska Range, and lighter amounts up into Fairbanks with some light snow and flurries, snow showers all the way up to and beyond the Yukon River there. But drier, colder conditions back to the west. Overnight low this morning, state's low of 51 degrees below zero at Bettles, with some minus 40s in the Kobuk into the Selawik Valley areas. And cold wind chills again over the western part of the state, and the wind chill warning eastern Arctic coast, eastern North Slope, eastern Brooks Range area through tonight. Otherwise, for tonight, we'll see low pressure edges northward onto the chart there, south of the eastern Aleutians. That'll start to bring increase in the moisture with somewhat of an increase in the winds, east-northeasterlies, to the Alaska Peninsula. Going to be right on the edge of the Arctic air there, so it could fall in the form at sea level, either rain or snow. Definitely will be in the form of snow for the Pribilofs, but nothing too terribly heavy. Ice edge starts to come in closer to the northeast point of St. Paul Island, but still probably won't make it tonight or tomorrow. Anyway, cold air will push the snowfall levels down to sea level, all the way down and beyond the Aleutians, with cold high pressure locked in over the North Slope. Areas of light snow with low pressure tracking in toward Turnagain Arm tonight. Look for periods of snow to develop over Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, Copper River Basin, much of the southeast interior again, extending possibly as far north with some flurries to the eastern Arctic coast, there at Kaktovik Barter Island area, dry back to the west. And another trough will bring another surge of showers or light rain periods, but a lot less wind for the panhandle. Although with the low pressure up over the Yukon, they'll stay kind of breezy there through Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, but less wind down to the south. And rainfall won't be all that heavy. Looking ahead to tomorrow, that front tracks up to the northeast there, bringing another round of moderate to possibly heavy rain, an increase in the winds for Kodiak Island. Temperatures near 40 degrees or into the lower 40s. And also south to north flow keeps it wet and mild over the panhandle with breezy conditions in the north, less wind down to the south, and the precipitation lighter also down toward Dixon Entrance, with areas of snow continuing for Prince William Sound, Cook Inlet, Madanuska-Susitna Valley, areas of light snow possible into the Copper River Basin, even north of the Alaska Range, Mid-Tanana Valley, Fairbanks area, Nenana, Delta Junction up toward Eagle, Chena Ridge probably will pick up a little bit more in the upslope areas there. Also increasing east-northeast winds result in some areas of blowing snow. Cold and dry conditions continue central western interior to the Arctic coast and down across all of the Bering Sea, with the northeast winds picking up moisture once it gets off the ice edge there. So a widespread area of light snow clouds, lower flying conditions, and snow showers will extend across all the southern Bering Sea and the Aleutians. Outlook for Tuesday, that pattern continues, but winds will begin to let up, although the cold air in place now across all the Aleutians, actually well south of the Aleutians, snowfall levels down to the sea level elevation, including the Alaska Peninsula. Looks like a break there for the Togiak Bay, Kuskokwim Delta, maybe the Yukon Delta, some clouds, snow showers there. Snow showers more likely up over Norton Sound and the Lotto Hills into the central interior. Kind of a widespread area of light snow over much of central and southern Alaska, mixing with rain along the coast, trending toward just rain, Cordova, definitely Middleton Island, Yakutat, and periods of rain over the panhandle. Heaviest precipitation back down toward the warm front, which is just crossing the Queen Charlotte's late in the afternoon, but that whole pattern will continue pushing northward Tuesday night and into Wednesday and start to significantly warm temperatures up over southern Alaska toward the middle and latter part of next week as it stays cold out to the west and to the north. Low temperatures tonight, anywhere from 30 to 50 below zero again over the northern interior, north slope areas, and well below zero right down into Bristol Bay and the southwest coast. Low dropping to around 5 for the Pribilofs, upper 20s for the Aleutians, and in the 20s for the Alaska Peninsula, mid-20s Kodiak Island, 15 to 25 south central Alaska, Copper River Basin, and in the 30s to near 40 for the Panhandle. Highs for Monday afternoon, 40 to 45 for the southeast coast, and in the 30s for the North Gulf Coast, lower 20s Copper River Basin, and the Susitna Valley, mid to upper 20s for the Kenai Peninsula, and Cook Inlet area, mid-30s for Kodiak Island, below zero north and west of the Alaska Range, and well below zero for the areas up over the Kobuk, Koyukuk Valley areas to the North Slope, highs in the minus 30s to near 40 below. Falling below zero, at least in the forecast, 2 below for the Pribilofs on Tuesday morning, with upper teens down to Adak, mid-teens for Atka, and 15 to 20 for the low, or actually 10 to 20 for the lows for the Alaska Peninsula, 34 for Kodiak Island, lower 20s for south central Alaska, upper teens for the Copper River Basin, staying mild over the Panhandle, and again lows anywhere from 35 to 50, 52 below for the North Slope into the northern interior. Quite cold out over the Arctic coast, and highs staying well below zero in that minus 30 to minus 40 range for the North Slope, but edging up towards zero.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
To flying weather, some IFR for the North Slope, central North Slope out to the eastern Arctic coast, and IFR northern Cook Inlet, eastern Susitna Valley, Madanuska Valley, and from Turnagain Arm right up across the Talkeetnas, northwest Prince William Sound area into the Copper River Basin, and up across the Alaska Ranger for the upper Tanana Valley 40-mile country to and north of Eagle. IFR for the southeast coast, IFR for the eastern Aleutians to about Atka, marginal VFR 8 to Shimia. Pribilofs in the IFR zone, but southwest coast, western interior, Bering Strait into the Chukchi Sea, all looking pretty good with VFR. And moving on to Monday afternoon. IFR lingering there along the Yukon River from Eagle up toward the Yukon Flats, a little bit there north of the mountains. Marginal VFR for the central and upper Tanana Valley, across the Alaska Range, Denali Park, right on down into the Susitna Valley, but becoming VFR for the Matanuska Valley and northern Cook Inlet. IFR slipping on up into Kachemak Bay and the southern Kenai Peninsula, probably into Seward, Resurrection Bay, Prince William Sound. IFR to westward to Portage, or I'm sorry, Whittier, maybe Portage, probably more likely Portage side of the hills there, marginal VFR. And then from about Girdwood on west, VFR. Yakutat to Elfin Cove, IFR, Panhandle marginal VFR, except for Misty Fjords, Stewart Hyder area, back to IFR there. Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, IFR, down to the eastern Aleutians, southern Bering Sea, and the Aleutians, marginal VFR. And for Tuesday morning, a little band of IFR there for the Pribilofs, otherwise VFR for the entire Aleutian chain, Alaska Peninsula up to about the Aleutian Range, northeast Bristol Bay marginal. Pretty good zone of IFR for Kodiak Island into Cook Inlet, but northern Cook Inlet holding VFR, at least into the morning, and IFR North Gulf Coast into Prince William Sound, much of the southeast coast. Good VFR over the interior, patch of IFR there over the upper Yukon River, and some marginal VFR for the central North Slope and central Arctic coastal areas. For the afternoon, Aleutians, VFR. For Tuesday afternoon, marginal VFR Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay into the central southern Kuskokwim Valley and southwest mountains, Togiak, Cape Newenham, VFR. St. Matthew Island, VFR. Pribilof, St. Paul, St. George, IFR, likely. And St. Lawrence Island, same thing, IFR, but Bering Strait north into the Chukchi Sea, northern interior, Arctic coast, VFR. Again, some IFR, Yukon River, northern Cook Inlet, Matanuska Valley, IFR, as well as Prince William Sound, and the North Gulf Coast, solid IFR for the Gulf of Alaska in across the Panhandle. That extends back to east side of Kodiak Island. Passes. Anatuvik, marginal VFR, trending toward VFR, but out again for tomorrow looks VFR the entire day. Lake Clark and Merrill, good VFR. Rainy, occasionally marginal. Windy, occasionally marginal. Isabel, occasionally marginal. And for Mentasta, VFR. VFR for Tanita. Portage, IFR Eastern Approach, otherwise marginal VFR. Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR. Freezing levels, 2,000 feet over the southern Panhandle. Otherwise, got the surface air across Cook Inlet down into the Aleutian Ranges north of the Alaska Peninsula. And on the north side of the Aleutians, and for icing, we've got a lot of moisture to the south, actually from the North Gulf Coast southward. There, Kodiak Island and another band into the Panhandle, moving in late tonight, early tomorrow, and in the afternoon beginning to improve there along the coast, with a widespread area of possible mixed icing out over the Bering Sea from the Pribilofs down to about the Aleutians. And taking a look at the jet stream, upper level low kind of digging southwestward, pulling the cold air into the Bering Sea, shoving it down to the Aleutians and beyond. So we've got southwest flow across southern Alaska, westerly, eastern interior, northeast for the western Arctic coast, and 125 knot jet there right across Yakutat and the Panhandle. 9,000 feet southwest, 55 knots, southeast interior, northeast 45 to 60 knots for the northwest interior out to the Bering Strait, turning north and diminishing to 35 knots there, St. Matthew Island. Light over the southern Bering Sea and Aleutians. Turbulence-wise, moderate chop, Cook Inlet, Alaska Peninsula, and the north central interior.
Technology. It's the rhythm of our everyday life. We're more dependent on satellite and communication systems than at any other time in history. Disruptions can affect our economy and even our safety. To prepare for the effects of such events and minimize impacts, we need to look outside our atmosphere, some 93 million miles away, at a star we call the Sun. It's our main energy source. It warms the earth and grows our food. While the sun and the space between may seem pleasant from our perspective, it's anything but peaceful. At its surface exists a chaotic state of eruptions and radiation. And unlike Vegas, what happens at the sun doesn't stay at the sun.
Space weather is essentially emissions from the sun, radiation, magnetic field that erupts from the solar surface, pumped out into space, sometimes right towards Earth. When it impacts the Earth, it impacts our technology. That's what we call space weather.
These solar events and their effects at Earth can disrupt systems we take for granted. From causing blackouts to the power grid, to delaying offshore drilling operations due to inaccurate GPS data. Interference with communication systems can force air traffic to reroute and impact rescue response and coordination. Outside our atmosphere, solar radiation can harm astronauts and the systems they depend on. The good news is that these eruptions can be detected early. Forecasters at the NOAA Space Weather Prediction Center in Boulder, Colorado, have their eyes on the sun at all times.
The Space Weather Prediction Center is part of the National Weather Service and is very much like a normal weather forecast office. We're here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're looking at data, we're looking at imagery, we're looking at model outputs. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches of imminent activity to our customers so they can take action.
In many ways, forecasting space weather is a lot like forecasting hurricanes. Those who rely on space weather forecasts, like electric power grid managers, are informed early on and can begin taking protective action.
When we see an eruption on the sun, space weather forecasters will issue a watch. This is much like a hurricane watch. When a hurricane sits offshore of Miami, for example, perhaps 48 hours out, we too can see way in advance that something may be coming towards the Earth.
As the storm moves toward us, it hits a monitoring spacecraft orbiting 1 million miles away from Earth.
It's kind of our buoy sitting out there offshore, and that hurricane about 30, 45 minutes before it makes landfall, we'll get the measurements from the buoy. That's what the spacecraft does for us. That big eruption that left the sun hits the spacecraft. Now we've got the measurements of exactly what's going to impact us here on Earth, and we issue the warnings to give the power grid a heads up that the storm is now imminent. An interesting element to this whole process is that when the forecasters issue the alert, the power grid receives the alert, takes the necessary actions to protect the grid, and the average citizen never knows anything ever happened.
The number of customers who rely on space weather information continues to grow. As our reliance on technology increases, so will our need for constant monitoring of the sun.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
GPS has changed society. Most people don't realize how remarkable and how many different applications there are.
The GPS has become an integral part, not just of our daily lives as far as cell phones and guidance for our cars and mapping, but the whole system in agriculture is really relying heavily on high accuracy GPS.
So they're using GPS to plant those seeds with centimeter accuracy. And then they can come behind it and irrigate and fertilize right where that seed is with that 1 centimeter accuracy.
The GPS creates a line for the operator that he can steer along, or you go to another level and the operator doesn't steer anymore and the tractor has an automatic steering system on it, much like a cruise control on a car, except for when I push the button it doesn't drive a set speed. When I push a button it stays on a predefined line.
You don't even need lights. You can do it at nighttime. You program your GPS and it's driving that tractor for you. So it's huge, and it's changing the way that the farmers farm the fields.
6 or 7 days out.
There's an interest in GPS applications from space weather side because when the sun is eruptive, it causes GPS to falter, and in some cases it doesn't work at all.
Productivity may suffer to a certain degree in that there's no way that I as a human being can steer as good 8 hours a day as a GPS system is going to do. It's going to be the same all day long. Some of the other application technologies, those are going to be gone. We're not going to have the ability to do good section control on sprayers and planters and fertilizer applicators without GPS.
We see a huge growing customer base in so many different industries, so many different sectors now relying on GPS and high precision GPS. They're all big customers for us.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at the coastal water forecast. Small craft advisories along the coast, starting on the north coast. Winds west 25 knots with 14-foot seas for the central coast. Southwest winds 25 knots. And the south coast, south winds at 25 knots. Southern inner channels, winds will be southwest up to 25 knots with seas for Clarence Strait up to 10 feet. Stevens Passage, south winds 20 knots, 4-foot seas, and small craft advisories for Lynn Canal. Winds down from today, south 25 knots with 5-foot seas. And moving on to the outlook for Tuesday. Small craft advisories along the coast, all south 30 knots, seas 15 feet. And southeast 25 knots for Clarence Strait with 5-foot seas. Stevens Passage, southeast at 20 knots, northern inner channels, inside waters, south at 20 knots with 4-foot seas. Prince William Sound, southwest winds 30 knots with seas just under 7 feet. And for the North Gulf Coast, gale warning, southwest winds 30 to 35 knots. Barren Island, small craft advisory, southwest 25 knots. Northern Cook Inlet, south winds at 20 knots with small craft advisory south of the Forelands. Winds will be south 25 knots and seas as high as 10 feet. Camashack Bay, west winds 30 knots. Tuesday, Prince William Sound, east winds 30 knots, 6-foot seas. Gale warnings continue for the North Gulf Coast, southeast 30 to 35 knots, 13 to 16-foot seas. Small craft advisories for the Barren Islands, southeast at 30 knots, Camashack Bay, northeast 30. And for Cook Inlet, northeast winds 20 to 25 knots, seas at around 6 feet. For Kodiak Island, east-northeasterlies for the day Monday at 25 knots, 8 to 12-foot seas. Alaska Peninsula, small craft advisories. North to northeast winds 25 to 30 knots, seas 9 to 11 feet. And for Bristol Bay, northeast winds at 25 knots, seas of 4 feet. And for Tuesday, pick the winds up a little bit there for Bristol Bay and turn it more northerly, 30 knots, but seas only at about 2 feet in the ice-free waters. And gale warnings for the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula, Cape Saracheff to Castle Cape, north winds 40 knots, Castle Cape to Sitkinak. They're east at 40, and also gale warnings east side of Kodiak Island, south winds 35 knots, Shelikof Strait east at 30, and the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula looking at north winds at about 30 knots with seas as high as 7 feet. For the eastern Aleutians on Monday, northeast winds 30 knots, seas 12 to 14 feet. Northeast 25 to 30 knot winds for Adak and Atka. Northeast 25 knots for Amchitka, Kiska, Shimei, and Atus with 11-foot seas. Tuesday, Shimei to Kiska, northeast 25 knots, seas 10 feet, Amchitka Island north at 25. And Adak and Atka, a little lighter on the winds, north 20 to 25 knots, seas around 10 feet. And for Unalaska Island, gale warnings, north winds as high as 40 knots. And for Unimak Island, small craft advisories with north winds as high as 30 knots, seas running in those areas 9 to 12 feet. Southwest coast, north winds 20 knots. But gale warnings out for St. Lawrence Island, north 35 knots, north 30 knots for St. Matthew Island, and northeast winds 30 knots for the Pribilofs with 8-foot seas. And for Tuesday, those winds for the Pribilofs come down to 20 knots from the north, seas subsiding to 7 feet. North 30 knots for St. Matthew Island and the southwest coast. Brisk wind advisories, northerlies 20 to 30 knots. Brisk wind advisories for St. Lawrence Island, north 25 knots. And brisk wind advisories for Norton Sound for north winds at 25 knots. For the central and western Arctic coast, winds will be north at 15 knots. And then on the east side, north to west winds 10 to 20 knots. Cape Beaufort to Wales, brisk wind advisories, north winds 30 knots. And for Tuesday, brisk wind advisories continue from Wales to Cape Beaufort for north to northeast winds sustained at 30 knots. Northeast 20 knot winds on the western Arctic coast, but much lighter for the central and east side. East to northeast winds at 10 knots. For tonight, Arctic high pressure keeps it cold with light winds over the north slope and the Arctic coast, but pretty good wind gusts coming through the Brooks Range there through the passes. With that tighter gradient, snow from Cook Inlet and the Kenai Peninsula northeastward across the mid and upper Tanana Valley, all the way up to the Barter Island Kaktovik area. Rain and occasionally breezy for the Panhandle, rain and snow for the eastern Aleutians. And the outlook for Monday, snow from the Pribilofs to the Aleutians, and rain and snow for the Alaska Peninsula, rain heavy times for the Panhandle, and unsettled along the North Gulf Coast.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.